Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. I'm thrilled to see so many of you joining from all over the country. My name is Anu Mali Patil, and I lead Overdeck Family Foundation, a national foundation focused on measurably enhancing education, both inside and outside the classroom. We're here today to launch our inaugural Grant Making and Impact Report, which highlights our foundation's key grant-making outcomes and lessons learned from 2021, as well as our best mistakes and how we plan to address them going forward. We'd love for you to take a look at the report, which you can see linked here in the chat. As we look back on this last year, all of us here at the foundation are extremely proud of what our funding has achieved. We dispersed over $45 million to almost 100 grantee partners, collectively reaching over 24 million children. And those funds accomplished a lot in partnership with our grantees. Notably, 22 new program models, including several remote or hybrid interventions that have shown early promise of efficacy and signals of improved cost effectiveness, 20 completed research studies, with 8 of those influencing either practice or policy, 5 grantees increased in ESSA tier, 12 grantees increased their earned revenue year over year by at least 25%, and 14 grantees increased their reach year over year by at least 25%. These outcomes really speak for themselves, and they wouldn't have been possible without our grantees who did the work or the leaders who led these organizations during a time of continued challenge and disruption. Today, we are lucky enough to have some of those leaders here with us. During the next 75 minutes or so, we'll be speaking with 10 leaders from across our foundation portfolios who spent this last year leading their organizations through unlocking innovation, evidence, and growth that reflect on successes and lessons from the past year, in addition to the factors that made this last year ripe for innovation, challenging for research, and exciting for growth. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping notes. First, if you haven't done so yet, take a minute to introduce yourself using the chat box below. Share your name and your organization so we have a sense of who's here with us today. Secondly, while everyone is in listen-only mode, we'd love this conversation today to feel interactive. So please join us in sharing your questions and thoughts through the chat box. We have the last 20 minutes reserved for Q&A, so please be sure to also include a specific panelist if you have one in mind, so I can help ensure that your question gets to the right person. And lastly, we're recording today's session, and a link will be available to all who registered. So with that, I'm super honored to welcome and introduce today's panelists. Joining us this afternoon to talk about how they sparked innovation in the past year, we have Heather Gonzalez, Vice President of STEM Education at Engineering is Elementary, the Curricula Division of the Museum of Science that develops programs to empower children to become problem solvers and lifelong STEM learners. Catherine Bassett, Executive Director of New Jersey Tutoring Corps, a high dosage small group tutoring program, and Alejandro Gibes-Tegak, founder and CEO of Springboard Collaborative, which helps teachers and family members become reading coaches to support students' reading goals. To speak on the topic of unlocking evidence, we have AJ Gutierrez, co-founder, Chief of Marketing and Communications, a Vice Chair at Saga Education, a personalized tutoring model designed to support students struggling with math, and Sarah Johnson, CEO of Teaching Lab, which offers a low-cost, high-impact teacher professional learning program. Lastly, to dive into the topic of growth, we have Lauren Sanchez Gilbert, CEO at Bell Excel, which provides a software platform to help schools and community-based organizations design, manage, and deliver summer and after-school programs. Brian Hassel, co-president of Public Impact Opportunity Culture, an effort that helps pre-K-12 districts and schools restructure to extend the reach of excellent teachers, principals, and their teams. Hee-Jae Lim, founder and CEO of Talking Points, a multilingual technology platform that connects families and teachers in more than 100 home languages. Claudia Miner, Executive Director of Waterford Upstart, which helps young children develop cognitive and socio-emotional skills at home by empowering families. and Billy McRae, Director of Research and Strategy at Zern, an online math learning platform built to help all kids love learning math. Welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for being here. So let's start by talking about innovation, which we saw quite a bit of over the past few years of the pandemic. I'll wait till we get some of the folks on here. Hi, Alejandro and Heather.
I know.
Hi, Catherine. So I'm really excited to talk to you all just about a few places where innovation was really needed more than ever in education as a result of the pandemic. So looking back on this past year, what was the problem each of your organizations was trying to solve, and how did you approach it innovatively? Heather, why don't we start with you, and then I'll turn it over to Catherine and Alejandro.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Anu. And thank you to the Overdeck Family Foundation for having us all here today in this conversation. For EIE, the problem we were really trying to solve was how do we help educators and families continue to engage in STEM learning when everybody was at home? So pre-pandemic, EIE only offered classroom kits. So we really needed to pivot to help educators and families continue to engage in hands-on learning from home. So EIE took our flexible out-of-school time curricula, a few of our units from our in-school curriculum, which luckily we had just launched digital versions of right before the pandemic, and we created a virtual learning pathway with individual on-the-go kits. This virtual learning pathway really gave guidance to teachers on how to get started with hands-on learning, whether it was remotely, hybrid, or in a classroom through social distancing. And professional development was built in at point of use when teachers really needed it the most. And then for families, we developed videos that showed caregivers how to engage in engineering design challenges at home, as well as many home activities. We also designed individual kits for the home, which also can be used in the classroom. And there are mini design engineering challenges with all the materials necessary to engage in STEM learning at home. So I guess you could say that we unlocked our kits and kind of reimagined our curriculum so that families, teachers, and students could really engage in hands-on learning, whether at home, fully virtual, hybrid, or in the classroom.
Thanks, Heather. It's a really good overview. Catherine, over to you.
Thank you so much for having us, and I'll echo Heather. We're so grateful to the Overdeck Family Foundation for its vision in funding this program and its vision in actually perceiving this program, because they were key to its actualization. So the problem that we were trying to solve was to address learning gaps, and I'm using that term instead of learning loss, because our scholars learned so much over the pandemic years about themselves, about resilience, about courage, about flexibility and adaptability. And yet they may have experienced gaps in academic content knowledge. And so we designed a high dosage tutoring program that ran in 23 sites, 13 counties across the state of New Jersey. It was the first high dosage tutoring program to run statewide in our state. We partnered with Boys and Girls Clubs and the Y Alliance of New Jersey because these organizations already had on-the-ground relationships with families and scholars. They were a trusted partner. And so we capitalized on that trusted partnership to bring our tutoring program into their programs. We essentially had 34 days to get our program off the ground. We had over 2,000 scholars served during the summer, over 100 field staff. And one of the innovations that really spoke to me as I considered taking this position was that a large percentage of the tutors, over 60%, were actually pre-service educators. So we were providing pre-service educators who had not had the opportunity through typical clinical or student teaching face-to-face experiences to get up close and personal with scholars to do so during the summer. And the impact was tremendous.
Thanks, Catherine, for that really helpful overview of the program. I'm excited to learn more about some of the early impact in just a minute. Alejandro, give us an overview of the work, the problem that you're solving and how you address it innovatively.
Thanks. And thank you, Overdeck, for your generous support for convening this group. Thanks to everybody for joining. I'm going to take a step back from the pandemic and talk about the capital P problem, the way we view it, the innovation that we take to addressing that problem. So I'll jump in right there. The way that I see the challenge is that parents' love for their children is the single greatest and the most underutilized natural resource in education. The research is clear that parental involvement in their kids' learning is a more powerful predictor of academic success than any other variable, including social class, including level of parental education. One study found that 80% of the variation in public school performance is attributable to family effects, not to school effects. Nonetheless, I feel like the American education sector focuses almost exclusively on school improvement, fixating on the 25% of kids' waking hours they spend in classrooms. And that's important, but the unfortunate reality is that school improvement alone can never fully close the achievement gap at scale. Fourth grade literacy rates in the US, they haven't budged in 25 years, and academic disparities are widening despite billions invested in classroom intervention. While over-investing in school improvement, I think the education sector has dramatically underinvested in students' time outside of school. And ignoring the role that families play in their kids' learning, it leaves the door wide open for inequity. Over the last decade, college-educated parents have quadrupled their investment of time and money in their kids. Parents without a college degree have kept that investment the same. Richard Reeves writes about that as a, quote, parenting gap that leads to a vicious cycle of intergenerational wealth inequality and economic immobility. Of course, that gap, it's not an accident. Structural racism, wealth inequality, a tattered social safety net. Those are all things that make parenting in the face of poverty a Herculean challenge. My family has experienced that challenge firsthand when my parents came to the US so that my sister and I could have better educational opportunities. Every parent has within them the same drive to nurture their kids. And low-income parents in particular, they want desperately for their kids to have a better future. In a recent survey from Learning Heroes, marginalized families say they're more worried about their kids learning than even their ability to pay the bills during the pandemic. And parents' single biggest unmet need is, quote, personalized learning, or personalized guidance rather, to support learning at home. So that's the way that I see kind of the most crucial and unaddressed reason that achievement gaps continue to widen despite massive investment in classroom intervention. When it comes to educating kids, and we learned this the hard way during the pandemic, there's no going around parents. Teachers have to work with them and through them to ensure kids learn across the continuum of home and school. So that's how we see the problem. The innovation briefly, Springboard's recipe for impact is a method we call family educator learning accelerators, FELAs for short. They're 5 to 10 week cycles during which educators and parents team up to help kids reach learning goals. And they've got these 6 basic steps. First, you build relational trust, whether it's through an in-person or a virtual home visit. You don't get far without trust. Then families and educators, they need a shared understanding of students' learning baseline so they can set a goal, which is step 3. That growth goal has to be winnable within 5 to 10 weeks. Fewer than 5 weeks, not long enough to produce a habit. Longer than 10 weeks, finish line's too far away to motivate behavior change. Step 4, practice, practice, practice. Kids practice with their educators, whether it's in person or virtual, whether it's a teacher or a tutor. Kids practice with their families at home for at least 15 minutes a night. And the whole team has to practice at least 4 times through workshops. For every hour that a teacher leads a family workshop, parents deliver 25 hours of tutoring at home. Step 5, at the end of the cycle, you measure progress. How do kids do relative to their goal? And the very final step is to celebrate together. Punctuating the experience with a quick win is what crystallizes lasting habits, both for the teachers who realize parents are the co-teachers I never quite knew I had, and also for the families who have the transformative experience of setting and achieving a goal with their kid. Springboard uses that FELA method to help schools dramatically improve literacy outcomes for pre-K through 4th graders. I'll pause there.
Thanks, Alejandro, for both painting the sort of bigger picture context, but also to sharing just sort of the more specific ways that you all aim to empower parents in their partnership with teachers and adults. So thank you for that. I'm really curious now that you all had a chance, each of you had a chance to sort of innovate your model or even sort of modify it during the pandemic. I'm really excited to talk about the impact and sort of outcomes that these innovations really had for kids. So I would love to start with you, Catherine, if you could share a bit more about the reach or the impact and anything else that came up as you started to innovate the model.
Thank you for that opportunity. I'm going to focus on the summer program. We actually kicked off our after-school program yesterday, but I'm going to focus on the summer program because that's where I have results to share. So in our summer program, we worked with scholars who were rising kindergarten through 5th grade students. We called them scholars specifically because it is a completely different connotation than children or students. It says we're here to learn, we're serious about teaching and learning, and we're going to do this together. We focused not only on academic achievement in math, and we only focused on math in the summer program, but also on social emotional learning skills and social justice skills. And so we used an external evaluator, the Crease Center at Montclair University, as well as conducting our own internal evaluation. And putting those two evaluation measures together, I can share with you that we saw significant increases in academic mathematical skills, ranging from 13 percentage points for 4th grade to 69 percentage points for 3rd grade. But every grade level, K through 4, saw significant academic gains in mathematics. We did not have a large enough N size to measure grade 5. So we focused on grades K through 4. And again, these were rising scholars in those grades. So this was significant. However, what is more important to me as someone who grew up as the oldest child, the daughter of an engineer who loved mathematics, but whose daughter was terrified of mathematics and was severely math phobic, what is more important to me is the increases that we saw in the attitudes of our scholars towards math. So 99% of our scholars told us that they left our 7-week program with a deeper understanding of math. 94% said that they were better equipped to ask for help. Another 94% said that they were willing to help their friends learn math skills. And 92% said that they would leave our program more willing to participate in math classes instead of sitting silently when they were stuck. To me, that is incredibly significant data in addition to the academic gains that we saw. We learned a great deal over the course of the 7-week summer program that we are incorporating into our after-school program, but I believe that you want us to share those results later in the conversation. Is that correct? Okay, so I'm trying to be very mindful of time, and I will stop there.
Thanks, Catherine. And just like you said, it's so incredible that you saw both the sort of shifts and changes in mindset and sort of perception and ability to do math, as well as some of the academic outcomes. So that's really incredible to hear. Heather, I would love to hear a little bit more from you about the impact or reach or anything else you'd like to share about the innovation.
Yeah, thanks, Anu. So I'm going to really focus on reach. We were able to support school districts like Metro Nashville with feeling comfortable engaging with hands-on learning with our on-the-go kits for their summer school programs. And that program in particular reached over 12,000 students. Our family activities reached about 185,000 children. And we were really able to partner with organizations like Greater Boston Food Bank, the Massachusetts Coalition for the Homeless, and the Office of Refugees and Immigrants, where they distributed over 10,000 of our EIE Try It kits to families to really make sure that families were engaging in STEM learning at home. And it was really all possible because of the support of our funders. So thank you.
Yeah, awesome. It's incredible to see these numbers here, Heather. So congratulations. And it's incredible to see so many families and kids getting access to these resources and materials. Alejandro, your turn. I'd love to hear more from you about impact and reach or anything else you'd like to share about the FILA method in action.
That sounds great. And I promise I'll be more brief this time. So I'll start with reach. Demand has been surging. It's a crazy time as districts are trying to address COVID learning recovery and receiving significant federal funding to do so. So just a few examples. In Massachusetts, we launched a statewide $3.3 million tutoring initiative for K-3 literacy. Tonight, LAUSD votes on a partnership, a 3-year partnership, more than 5 times the size. So I'll be watching the live stream with a beer in hand. Keep your fingers and toes crossed. In Baltimore, they grew our partnership to serve almost half of the elementary schools in the district. In just the last year, Springboard's geographic footprint grew from 29 cities to 59 across the country. We doubled our revenue. We more than doubled our earned income, doubled the full-time staff, which has all kinds of growing pains that come along with that. But I will say, the districts are struggling to recruit enough educators to enroll as many kids as they would like. That's certainly a pain point that we've experienced. Impact. All that growth only matters insofar as kids are becoming stronger readers within our model. So I'll briefly highlight 2 wins. One in 2020, we were able to structure an analysis that compared iReady lifestyle scores from before the first shutdown and the next fall. And we found that Springboard participants averaged a 256-point gain relative to the control group that grew just 41 points. And the fact that the treatment group made more than 6 times the progress of the control group, to me, is a testament to the power of the FELA method and the power of parent-teacher collaboration. When parents and teachers are working together, they can turn the COVID slide into a springboard. And then more recently in 2021, we completed an externally advised study that kind of compared our intensive offering that we've done for the last decade with our relatively newly launched that kind of light touch program that we kicked off at the beginning of the pandemic. And the study showed statistically significant reading growth across both programs, and the intensive model averaged a 3.1 month reading gain during a 5-week program. And in the lighter touch program, kids averaged a comparable 2.3 month reading gain. And for us to see that the light touch program model that's brand new is already making 75% of the impact of the original model at only 1/3 of the cost is super exciting. And in every evaluation that we've done, the kids that are furthest behind grade level are the ones that are making the most progress, which is especially meaningful in kind of the dire context that so many of our kids and families find themselves in today.
Yeah, thank you for that overview. So Alejandro, you just got us kicked off a little bit already on some of the challenges that you have faced as you've really navigated pretty significant growth here in the last few years. So maybe I'll tee up the question for all 3 of you, and we'll turn it back to you first, Alejandro, to start walk us through your perspective. But it sounds like each of us, and as all of us have, each of these organizations, each of you all have navigated challenges in the implementation, rollout, and growth of your organizations and work. I'm kind of curious to get your take on what made this year really ripe for innovation despite the many obstacles, and any lessons that you are carrying forward with you.
I appreciate the question. The glass really is half full. I think that people are looking at old problems with new eyes. That really is kind of the opportunity. School closures, in a lot of ways, they awakened the education sector to the essential role that parents play in their kids' learning. And I think families, in turn, have also been awakened to their children's schooling. For a long time, families have been in the dark. There's research from Learning Heroes. I keep harping on Learning Heroes, but I'm a big fan of their research that found that 9 out of 10 K-8 parents think their kid is performing on grade level in reading and math, when of course we know that only 1/3 of kids actually are performing on grade level in those areas. So families are operating in the dark, and which makes it super hard for them to be kind of the full-throated advocates for their kids' learning needs that they would like to be. But overnight, school closures turned the lights on. For more than a year now, Zoom and Google Classroom have been transporting tens of millions of kids into the classroom on a daily basis. The idea that America's education system is falling behind, it's no longer abstract. Like, we got front row seats as parents. It's in front of our eyes, and it's personal. Like, our kids' future hangs in the balance. I think that new visibility has, in a lot of ways, awakened a sleeping giant, and that creates an opportunity, right? Schools and families, they're seeing each other with new eyes in 2021. And that gives us the chance to rebuild the education system so that parents and teachers work together rather than in isolation to accelerate learning recovery. This is not the time to reach for the familiar set of classroom interventions that have only ever failed to move the needle. This is the moment for the education system to finally figure out how to help parents and teachers partner up in service of student learning. If we miss that opportunity, shame on us, because we're not going to have another one like it.
Yeah. Very powerful. Thank you for that, Alejandro. And Catherine, you started touching on some of the lessons that you've learned already just from a first year of implementation. Why don't you talk us through some of your reflections on why this year was such a good year for you all to launch the tutoring for New Jersey, and any lessons that you're carrying forward?
Thank you. So challenges that we experienced, I think our primary challenge was the short time frame under which we were working, 34 days to launch a statewide tutoring program. My staff wasn't even hired until the first day of tutoring. And so it was a lot, to get off the ground. But we did it because we had such committed partners, and we had such committed tutors and site coordinators. We utilized a field staffing structure where our pre-service educators, some certified educators, paraprofessionals, retired educators were our tutors, and our site coordinators who oversaw the site logistics and partnered with the site directors from the Boys and Girls Clubs and the Y Alliance were certified teachers for the most part. And so these people had been isolated in New Jersey, teaching virtually, teaching in hybrid models, but very few teaching full-time face-to-face, and they were hungry for those opportunities. And so the challenge was the time, the opportunity was, let's get people back into face-to-face environments with scholars. At the same time, parents and scholars had experienced that exact same scenario and were also hungry to get back to face-to-face learning. Some of the comments that we received from the tutors were that this was the first opportunity that our pre-service educators had had in their education to actually be face-to-face with scholars, and they were just over the moon. I mean, I could give you 100 quotes and I could still keep going. The scholars themselves, I'll give you one quote. I think it's cool because you get to learn other stuff that school didn't teach you, but your tutoring teacher does. I'll also share that one of our site directors asked her scholars, what was your favorite part of the summer program? Now, mind you, the summer programs at the Boys and Girls Clubs and the Y Alliance include things like swimming, basketball, video games, coding, and yet the scholars said our favorite part was tutoring. And so I think that there was a hunger for that face-to-face interaction. Some of the things that we learned is that coaching is critical. We had a master coach who went from site to site. As we've launched the after-school program, we've added the role of site-based coaches. So not only do we have site coordinators, we also have coaches. We also wanted to pilot literacy. So not just math, but literacy. So we're doing literacy grades K2 using iReady. We're still doing math grades K5 using illustrative math. We also learned that we needed our training of our field staff to be longer in duration. So not just pre-training, but training throughout the program. And so we are instituting that in the after-school program. And we also made the change to including some sites, not all, offering virtual tutoring. So we're using a virtual tutoring platform. We are piloting virtual tutoring through our program. And we're also using a digital platform to track things like attendance, formative assessment, summative assessment, etc. In the summer, we didn't have that. We used many Google Forms and Sheets. So we are piloting some new things, and we're very excited to see how things go.
That's great, Catherine. And it's such a good lesson and a good reminder that fast innovation, like the three of you have really implemented, also leads to fast learning and fast improvement. These cycles of learning just really keep going. So really appreciate you outlining that for us. Heather, over to you. Why don't you share a little bit more about some of the kind of the things, the challenges that you faced, and even some of the opportunity in that innovation?
Sure, and I'll keep it brief, but I totally agree with Alejandra. This past year, really, the approach to education had to shift, and the lines between education and family just got so much stronger. And what's it that they say that humans thrive when there are problems to solve, right? And that's what holds true with EIE. It's like we really took a step back to look at things through a fresh perspective at work, and what we do in order to help families and educators. And the natural result of that is innovation.
Thanks, Heather, and thanks, Alejandro and Catherine. We'll see you back here later in the conversation. Thanks for kicking us off. So I'm excited to switch gears here and to talk about evidence and research with Sarah and Alan. Nice to see you both. And nice to see you again, Sarah. It's been a while. So I know this past year, research was incredibly hard to conduct during COVID for so many reasons. And as most of you know who are listening, our foundation believes that evidence is a thesis for scale, which is why we think it's so critical and so important to study and to support organizations in studying their impact and their work as they grow. So I'm excited to hear Alan and Sarah for you guys to tell us about your organizations, the research that you conducted this past year, and even to tell us about some of the findings of that research. So why don't we start with you, Alan, to kick us off, and then I'll turn over to you, Sarah.
Thanks so much. Great to be on this call. AJ Gutierrez and I co-founded Saga in 2014 to work with kids like AJ. AJ was a 14-year-old when I met him in Boston. I was heading a charter school called Match. He was a 9th grader. We had a good school, but not a great school. And so 2 years into his high school career, we started a Match Corps. I'm one of the co-authors of the phrase high dosage tutoring. I guess I'm one of the OGs of tutoring. So this began in 2004 in a public school, first in our knowledge across the country that had embedded tutoring for all kids as part of the day. And AJ and I have been together now for 18 years, which has been a remarkable experience. So Saga made its name on being a vendor of 9th grade Algebra 1 tutoring services, in-school day, high dosage, coined the phrase high dosage. And we have 6 randomized control trials over the last 7 years directly on our work, starting in 2013 in Chicago. We have a 7th that we associated with out of the Netherlands, where we've been consulting in the Netherlands for 6 years. So we have 7 randomized control trials. That has been the wind beneath our wings. University of Chicago's Urban Labs has done many of those. NORC, another group also out of the University of Chicago, has done a randomized control trial. And that really has been powerful evidence that what we do, which is high dosage in the day, class for credit if it's in high school, on the student's schedule, so it's not an after-school program, it's in the day, with trained tutors who are supervised by a coach in the room, giving them feedback on the spot, on the job. And that, by the way, is the secret sauce of tutoring. For those of you who are doing tutoring, coaching in service is the secret sauce to successful tutoring. A lot of other things you need to deal with, but that's the thing often overlooked, and that's the secret sauce. So we were that for our first 7 years as a nonprofit, but we're pivoting. We are not just a direct service provider now in 6 different jurisdictions, including the biggest, New York and elsewhere, but we are positioning ourselves as the trusted partner for states and districts and organizations like some on this call to help anyone who's going to do tutoring do it better, based on what now is 17 years of our experience in tutoring, 10 before Saga and 7 since. We've been chosen by the state of New Mexico as their trusted partner, so chosen by the city of Chicago as their trusted partner. Boys and Girls Club is going to deploy a training portal we put out, which is useful for tutors of any subject, any grade. Even the New Jersey Tutoring Corps could use it. It's free, it's self-paced, and it's distilled 17 years of our learning into 18 modules around 3 areas: relationship, rigor, and ratio. How to make an effective tutorial no matter grade or subject area. And that's for free. Our curriculum is out for free, because tutors need a tutor-specific curriculum to use. They can't take off-the-shelf teacher curriculum. So we've developed this with the input of kids and tutors over the years. And so that's for free. So a lot of what we're doing is for free. I really honor the Overdeck Foundation for their support for us. Mike Levine, one of our board members, is on this call from Nickelodeon. We've had a lot of great support to make this possible. But this past year, there's a technical word for it. I won't use it in this public setting, but it was a tough year to do research. So there were no randomized trials. We talked Harvard out of doing a randomized control trial. Said, look, it's going to be a blank, blank. You don't want to do it, do a quasi-experimental design. Maybe match set comparisons, maybe observational studies, but that's, this last year, that was the best that could be done. We're looking to do some serious randomized trial now in our 7th one of a new model we've got, which is an online tutors while our staff supervise kids in the school. Our tutors are remote. So in Florida, we've got tutors from 15 states tutoring the kids in Broward County. So research, I think, will look better coming in the next school year, but this year it's really quasi-experimental.
Okay, super helpful, Alan. Thanks for that. And it's really awesome to hear the history that you have with AJ and all that you've learned over the last 18 years together. Sarah, I'd love to invite you into the conversation. I would love if you could start just by telling us about Teaching Lab, some of your reflections about research in this past year, and even some of the findings.
Yeah, wonderful. It's great to be here. And Anu said, it's great to see you again, because I actually had the privilege of working at the Overdeck Family Foundation in the past. And 3 years ago, almost exactly 3 years ago, Anu, I started leading Teaching Lab, and I'm proud to say that with our amazing team and with Overdeck's support, we have grown 5 times over the last 3 years. So we are 5 times as large as we were in 2018. It's a huge deal. We've definitely, speaking to Alejandro's point, have had our own growing pains as well. But at Teaching Lab, our mission is to fundamentally shift the paradigm of teacher professional learning for educational equity. And although I also agree with Alejandro that the parents and family are essential partners in the educational outcomes of students, what we also know is the most important within school factor to advance student learning is the teacher. But over and over and over again, we hear from the 3.8 million teachers we have in our nation that they're not prepared, they're not getting the support they need. And when they do get the support given to them by the school system or by their school, they oftentimes don't like it or it's insufficient. And so at Teaching Lab, when we're talking about fundamentally shifting the paradigm, that's what we mean. We want to change all of that so that every single teacher in this nation gets a high impact year of professional learning every single year of their careers. And so in order to do that, we believe that research is the way that we do our work. And Anu is familiar with this because I've been saying this for years as well, but we believe in what we call little r research and big R research. And so what I want to show is that the little r research is about our dedication to using data, any data that we can get our hands on for continuous improvement. And the big R research is related to our commitment to engaging in what Alan was just talking about. So as many rigorous studies as we can. Because the other thing that's true about teacher development and teacher professional learning is although we know the teacher is so important, there is an extreme dearth of evidence around what actually works in order to get every teacher to be excellent for every student across the nation. So this slide is an example of how we use what I'm calling proximal data to assess continuous improvement. And we're really proud of this, but I also want to show it in order to, just model vulnerability as well. So you can see that in March of 2020, we shifted a 100% in-person model to a 100% virtual model. And throughout the entire time that Teaching Lab has existed, the satisfaction rates from our teachers are exceptionally high. But when we shifted very quickly, some of those satisfaction rates, as well as whether or not teachers felt like they were building a strong sense of community, those plummeted. But we used those proximal measures to continuously improve and adapt very quickly. And then you can see that after 3 months, our virtual professional learning became as good as our in-person professional learning. And since July of 2020, we've made several enhancements to our virtual delivery model. And I know Overdeck says this a lot, we have low cost, high impact teacher professional learning model, but that's what we're committed to making it as scalable as possible while not compromising on quality. So you can see here that this is an example of the way we use data to do that. And then if we could show the next slide. And so additionally, we didn't stop doing rigorous research over the last year. It just looked different. So this is very similar to what Alan is saying. We just kept doing rigorous research in the best way we possibly could. But we're really, really proud to say that we conducted an external evaluation of our work in New Mexico, and we were still able to see statistically significant evidence of impact, particularly related to shifts in teacher knowledge, mindsets, and practice. And I can stop there for a second, Anu, and sort of let you steer the conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah, for that overview, and appreciate you just sort of sharing, even so vulnerably, some of the changes in your program model and some of the changes in impact and results over time. It's important to do that, and I really appreciate that. But Alan, you already started speaking to this, and so maybe we can have this part be a little bit of a conversation. Kind of curious, you spoke a little bit to this last year looking very different for research for you and for Saga than previous years or relative to the years prior, which might have been more RCT heavy. How are you thinking about the balance, as Sarah calls it, little R research and big R research, or even how you think about research going forward, or any lessons from this last year that you think could be relevant?
We're talking about the 2021 year. I think we're in 22 now.
2021 year, 2021 year.
2020 year, just couldn't deliver the model as it was designed because kids were at home, distractions, device problems, connectivity problems, and we're delivering virtually. Although we're ready to deliver virtually, we couldn't do it as effectively in those conditions. So we want to do an RCT. It would be, I think, our last on this online tutoring model. Again, we have the best evidence, according to the U.S. Department of Ed and others, McKinsey and others, about in-school day tutoring. But we don't have an RCT. I need a big R on that, on the online model, because it's different. The key question there is, can online tutors build relationship capital? Relationship is the central premise of what we do. Sufficient such that we can equal what was done in person, because the efficiency of online tutoring is much greater than the efficiency of in-person tutoring. You can command resources much more nimbly. You can put kids in breakout rooms. You can, there's no one getting up and distracting. It's just like right there on the screen, and with the right platform, which we have for math, it's really, really effective. Can we build relationships? We need to measure that. And I think a big R is what we need for using Sarah's terminology. And we use little R all the time, daily assessments, formative and summative, baseline foundational skills assessment 5 times a year, baseline interims and end of year. And so we've got some data, but the RCT is what got us to where Saga is today. Yeah. And so the next iteration is the online model as good and it's cost effective and maybe even better. Nobody has that answer. We want to have that answer, not just for ourselves, but for all the organizations that we're going to say, look, online tutoring will work better for you. You'll be able to source easier, replace easier, manage easier, as long as you can build a relationship. So we're going to go for that, hopefully as soon as this coming fall, if not the year after.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you're really focusing in on that one component that is really centrally different between the in-person and virtual model. Sarah, I love that you referenced the little R and big R research. And just curious, as you think back on 2021, how did your research look different in this past year compared to previous years at Teaching Lab? And any lessons that you'd carry forward about how you want to approach research in the years to come?
Yeah, absolutely. So, people talk about silver linings during the pandemic, and sometimes that doesn't sit well. But I do think at Teaching Lab, we learned a lot about how to collect and analyze data from across the nation, and also how to continue to conduct research, even amidst pretty difficult and trying circumstances. And so I've got some lessons learned here that I just want to share with the entire group. And so what we did this past year, and we actually really started doing this at the height of the pandemic, is that we revised our data sharing agreements. And we just built the data sharing agreements into every single contract we have with every single partner. And so we were kind of surprised to learn that with most school systems, they would just agree to hand over a great deal of data to us. And then if they didn't agree right away, putting that into the contract would give us a sort of launching off point for a conversation. And then we would have to have these, long extended conversations with districts like New York City and Chicago and all that jazz. And then the other lesson we learned is that you can learn a lot from collecting and analyzing data on proximal measures. So let's say your ultimate goal is to have an impact on student learning. What are the measures that are ultimately predictive of that final outcome that you want to have? And there's a lot of research and evidence on that. So we collect everything. We collect teacher satisfaction rates, teacher mindset data, teacher practice data, teacher content knowledge, pedagogical content knowledge, and then we are mining that data for correlations across all of those different measures. So what we think a teaching lab is sort of the more data, the better. And even when you can't get access to test score data and whatnot, you can still make inferences about your impact using that proximal data. And that's something we had to do during the pandemic, but we're going to continue to do that going forward because you learn so much from collecting all of that information. Additionally, we learned about the strength and importance of forming partnerships. And so we actually launched this new partnership across 6 nonprofits called the Research Partnership for Professional Learning, where we're going to collectively work together to solve some of these problems we have related to the dearth of evidence around what actually works to improve teacher learning. And so that's launching now. We're going to open up data across these nonprofits to 20 amazing researchers in the field. And then additionally, at Teaching Lab, we have several research partnerships, like partnerships with researchers, and this has really accelerated our learning as well. So none of that has to end, even though school systems are recovering from the pandemic. Finally, we think it's really important to invest in cutting edge technology. There's technology that allows all of this research, data collection, data cleaning, data storage to be 1,000,000 times more efficient. And that's nerdy. These investments in data infrastructure that we made are nerdy, but they can actually accelerate all of the research that organizations do to both assess continuous improvement and impact. And then finally, we actually expanded our research and data team during the pandemic. And I think it's a really good time to do this. I know that it might sometimes be like last on the list of things that organizations want to invest in, but it's such a crucial time period to figure out where we actually can get the biggest bang for our buck. So let's invest in research, data analysis, collecting data, and invest in research practice partnerships so that we can actually generate the findings that allow us to marshal, say, for instance, like federal dollars right now for the highest impact interventions.
Sarah, it's so helpful to see these lessons outlined so clearly, and it's also such a well noted point that getting to do the impact and learning, sort of like the learning and improvement work alongside the more rigorous research, both can be done simultaneously and both have meaningful value for the organization. And so just really appreciate you walking us through that. And Alan and Sarah, I'm so grateful to you both for this portion. We'll hopefully get to see you back on here at the end for some predictions on 2022.
That'd be great.
All right, thank you. Okay, so last but not least, let's turn to the topic of growth. As folks jump on, I'll just give a little quick context. As a foundation, we focus on identifying and fueling the scale of cost-effective, sustainable programs and solutions that accelerate improvement in academic and socio-emotional outcomes for kids. We fund innovation and evidence to fund and find the most impactful programs so that we can support their growth. And we know that there's many nonprofits that have struggled in these past few years, yet your 5 organizations all experienced immense growth in the last few years. Whether it was measured by increase in reach, increase in earned revenue, or additional funding. So I'd really just be curious to have you talk a little bit about why you think that was and how your organizations went about meeting the increases in demand. Lauren, why don't we start with you, and then I will sort of tee each of you up after that accordingly.
Hey, thank you, and thanks for having me here. Yeah, we were very lucky this last year, and I'd say combined with a lot of intentionality of experiencing a 300% growth increase, expanding to 36 states. Some of this was based on some specific things we did, and other parts was just really great timing. We started out many, many years ago, many know us in the space as being a premier provider of out of school time programming for kids. We put a lot of research into that and have a huge body of third party evidence of how effective it is. But what we started to discover is that in that evidence, what is required is great programming with great program management. That if you don't have that management piece, whatever you're trying to deliver tends to fall apart. And when we were scaling ourselves, we were creating tools for our regions and then started to take a step back and said, are we trying to scale ourselves or are we trying to scale the evidence? And what we decided is that we're trying to scale the evidence. And so we codified all what we had and created in essence, a licensing model, almost a paper-based product that had the management and the content. And that was highly effective, but it still didn't have what we were looking for, which is just catalytic change. And we knew that what does create catalytic change, but software. So we set out to create an enterprise solution that is specific for our space. And I will say the timing of the release was 2021, which happened to coincide perfectly with a huge infusion of funding. So those are two kind of outside factors that, worked out in our favor. The other two pieces was that we put a lot of energy in the relationships where we were building and really were strategic about them. One being partnering with national network organizations like the YMCA, Boys and Girls Club, et cetera. So really paying attention to those and knowing full well that they also have already an in-grade network that is across the country. And the second was really cultivating our school districts and school partners so that when this moment came about, they trusted us and they just trusted our new product to be effective for them when they needed to deliver quickly. If you remember last summer, real urgency to get kids in person, we had the tools that allowed them to do so effectively. The second big piece that was a huge factor in our success was capital, unrestricted funding. You really do need in our space the funding and able to deliver big results. And Overdeck is just an perfect example of being a partner to nonprofits and believing in our vision and taking that calculated risk to allow us to think differently. We wouldn't be where we were if that wasn't there. We saw a 50% increase in our philanthropy. And a lot of that was the power of also Overdeck harnessing their network to connect us to others so that we could grow.
Thanks for that, Lauren. I couldn't agree more that just unrestricted capital is so important, especially during periods of high growth. Brian, I would love to invite you into the conversation just to share a bit more on this topic of growth.
Yeah, thanks so much for including me. I'm just learning so much from the other panelists, so I really appreciate the chance to be part of this. So just let me give a quick note about what opportunity culture design is. It's a national initiative. It's aiming to give all students access to great teaching and all teachers access to great support and opportunities. And the way it works is schools using this model reorganize into small teaching teams that are led by a multi-classroom leader who's a great teacher, an MCL who had prior high growth as a teacher. They continue to teach, but they also lead a team of 3 to 8 other teachers, plus any paraprofessionals or teacher residents that may be part of that team. And they truly lead that team to achieve teaching excellence for all kids. They also earn more, about 20% above the salary schedule on average, and that's all within recurring school budgets. And so looking at these growth numbers on the screen, we were able to go to new systems, increase the number of schools, increase the number of kids. Why were we able to do that in this climate? I point to a couple of factors. So one is kudos to the leaders of our outreach, Stephanie Dean, as well as the 2 senior leaders of opportunity culture implementation, Allison Harris-Welcher and Shanika Ellison. So these leaders did what's the key to any kind of engagement, which is to build relationships with top leaders of systems, understand their needs really well so that we could respond. These leaders did that masterfully. Overdeck funding was so important to that work as well. So that's one of the big factors. The other one is that the opportunity culture model itself directly addressed some of the key challenges of this current moment. And the kudos there I give mainly to Public Impact's co-president, Emily Askew-Hassel, who created the model and continues to work with our design team to make it better and better using data the way we heard about it in the last segment. And the model really addresses some of the key challenges that were live in this particular moment. And the first one, and let's look at the next slide. The first one is unfinished learning. So the third-party studies of opportunity culture say that when teachers join these teams led by NCLs, they start out beforehand teaching at about the 50th percentile of student growth, but once they join the team, that jumps up to about the 77th percentile. So depending on how you measure that, that's adding up to 0.7 or 0.8 years of learning for the kids that are part of that. So it truly is great teaching for all kids that are part of these teams. So that's one. Next slide. This is also a period of time when teachers really needed extra support. They always need more support than they've had, as Sarah eloquently described. They really needed that in this period of time, especially during remote learning. And you can see on this slide that teachers are really satisfied when they're part of these opportunity culture teams, whether they're the leader, the multi-classroom leader, or whether they are one of the members. So this is a reform that teachers actually really like and want to keep in their schools. And then third, I don't have a slide for this, but the third one I think is that leaders are really looking for models that were financially sustainable beyond the current time. And so the way this model works is school teams, mostly made up of teachers, figure out how to reallocate the resources to pay teacher leaders more, to pay for the paraprofessionals and teacher residents. And then they can keep doing that as long as it works for them. They don't need a special grant or special funding. And that's much in need at this period of time. So it's a model that really met the moment, and our outreach leaders did a fantastic job of forging those relationships that allow us to reach more kids ultimately.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. I'm hearing some good common themes around relationships and trust building and being able to build sustainable models and having technology to support that growth. EJ, I'd love to invite you into the conversation to share a bit more about Talking Points growth over the last few years, and even some of your reflections about what enabled that growth and enabled you all to meet the demand.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for bringing us all together, Anu and Overdeck Foundation. So Talking Points, quick background, we are an education technology nonprofit, and our mission is to unlock the potential of families in being engaged in their children's education, especially for under-resourced immigrant and diverse communities. So about 89% of the partner schools that we work with are Title I eligible. 70% of the students are non-white, and we make a multilingual family engagement platform that allows for families, educators, school, and now district administrators to communicate in over 110 languages with human and AI powered translation and capacity supports and kind of enhancing the capacity to build those relationships. So as you can imagine, in spring 2020, we knew that schools played a vital role in their students' lives, not just ensuring that the learning happens, but also that they have internet access, meals, a place to study, and access to mental health services. And this was even more the case in virtual learning. So Talking Points has been a really essential connection point for schools to communicate with families on all of these fronts, and particularly in the communities that we serve. We woke up one day in March and lockdown happened, and all of a sudden we saw a 20x fold kind of increase in the number of signups from educators, sometimes a 50x volume uptick in communication volume, and that just continued throughout the spring of 2020. And as you can see on the page, at the time in March 2020, we had cumulatively served about 500,000 families across the US. And as of late last year, we had served 5 million, almost 5 million students' families across 49 states in the US. And kind of that incredible tenfold increase was also reflected in our budget growth. Some of our staffing growth, so we grew 5x as an organization in terms of FTEs, as well as earned revenue grew about tenfold to date. I think those are some of kind of the stats of our growth, but I think we met the moment by kind of making a response plan when, these external factors kind of pulled us or thrust it into action, growing our internal capacity and really focusing on growing that fast, and also seeking emergency capital to support that, while in the meantime, making sure that we knew the hows and kind of the values that we were grounding ourselves in. So we swiftly developed a COVID response plan, which included opening up talking points for schools and districts, which we normally charge a partnerships fee for free to Title I schools and districts who serve the highest needs students. All of our content, resources, product development was focused on the new context of distance, virtual, and now hybrid learning. We also had to focus on growing our internal capacity. We created a COVID task force that every morning gave it a kind of a singular focus for the organization with weekly metrics. And it was, everything was just so focused on scaling internal capacity, as well as shifting resources to support onboarding via different channels like webinars. Our Zoom broke down in the first couple of weeks because we didn't think that thousands of educators would be joining the webinars, expanding our resource center, extending our support chat while kind of hiring, scaling up our staff across all functions. And then of course we had to seek emergency funding to be able to support that scaling up the operations. Overdeck, we're really grateful for the support that we had from Overdeck at that time, and also renegotiating our vendor contracts to kind of push down the cost of operating. I think if we go to the next slide, a couple of other things. What really helped us make some of these decisions was our organizational values. They say that crisis forces you kind of prioritize and think about what really matters to the organization. Earlier in 2020, we had just had an all-team offsite and had an exercise in brainstorming what our values might be, which then crystallized into these by the end of the school year. And then, of course, if we go to the next slide, we wanted this momentum to continue. Coming off the year of 2020, we established a multi-year growth plan to really sustain the momentum and leverage the tail ends we had experienced. And our goal is now to reach 10 million students and their families by 2023 through strategic growth, investing our research as well as product development, and of course a continued focus on scaling and building our foundational infrastructure. So our learning was that without that, everything will break, and everything always will, but you can kind of get there and plan for the future as well.
Thanks, EJ. I love that you still have such aspirations for your future growth. We're excited to sort of chart your journey. Claudia, I would love to hear from you about the growth of Upstart and any of your reflections about what enabled it to happen. And then Billy, you'll help us close out on this question.
Great. Well, thank you. And thank you for featuring us in the annual report and for your support, of course. We were fortunate in that we were already a virtual program with a strong support model. Our goal is kindergarten readiness, and we do that with a tech-delivered curriculum and a strong parent coaching component. So just like Springboard Collaborative and others have mentioned, we believe in the power of parents. So we had uninterrupted service, which few can say, which meant we could just continue to do what we had been doing and then build on rather than having to pivot. We evaluated our past work over 14 years to see what kind of COVID response programs we could do in addition to our regular program. And the result was a condensed program we called Summer Learning Path. The timing turned out to be perfect because children who had had to leave school in 2020 could do it in the summer. And children in 2021 who had, let's just call it a tumultuous year in 2021, could also do it. And we all know that many children in early education didn't even go to school that year. So it was an important opportunity for us. We established new partnerships with school districts in addition to our outreach to parents at home. And districts were looking for a summer solution. Many of you have talked about the things you've done, but we all know they were having staffing issues, so our turnkey solution was very attractive to them. We actually ended up serving not just preschoolers, but kindergartners, first and second graders as well. We got very positive results that I'm happy to share with anybody if you reach out to me and ask. So positive, in fact, that this summer we're actually going to be conducting a random control trial on the program. So both our regular Upstart program and our Summer Learning Path program were solutions eligible for available COVID relief funding. So we were able to access those funds in addition to our regular funding sources. And our goal as of next fall will, and we're set to achieve it, to have been in all 50 states.
Well said and very concisely done. Nice work, Claudia. Billy, over to you to help us sort of understand Zern's trajectory of growth these past few years and your reflections on what enabled it.
Yeah, happy to share. So at Zern, this was mentioned at the beginning, but we're a nonprofit founded on the belief that all kids are math kids and that every student can love learning math. So with the Zern math platform that includes instructional materials with daily lesson plans for teachers, and then also adaptive software-based student digital math lessons, we've grown at this point to serve over 1 in 4 elementary school kids nationwide. And as I think about the growth over the last 2 years, I think about 2 things primarily. One was just so much of meeting the demand is based on how our core product experience is designed. Zern's built to help kids catch up and move forward in their learning. And I think what's really unique about Zern is that our digital math lessons provide multiple layers of support, all built into great appropriate learning. So kids can catch up and move forward at the same time. And over the last 2 years, with so much additional unfinished learning for kids, educators really needed this type of high quality material with built-in learning acceleration. Things like an embedded daily diagnostic that assesses each student's understanding and automatically launches support exactly where kids need it. We know that all kids don't master every concept from prior grades, so our materials don't assume that they do. That's one of the most important parts of Zern. We're continuously assessing and diagnosing and giving kids the boost that they need built into their grade level learning. And all of our remediation paths are based on data from, at this point, over 9 billion math problems completed on our platform over the years. So that's one. A second is just our program is really designed to be flexible to the needs of the communities we serve. So from a use case perspective, it can be a digital math companion to high quality instructional materials. It can be a tutoring platform. It can be used as kind of a full core curriculum. So it's really flexible to meet the different jobs to be done that the teachers, administrators, parents, and others need for it. We work closely with educators to make sure that our materials are really robust and rigorous and engaging and really relevant for how schools need to use them. And I think that commitment to serving educators has resulted in lots of adoption across use cases for Zern over the last 2 years.
Really powerful reflections, Billy, just to stay really close to the user and to be really designing solutions that are really meeting the needs and various jobs to be done. So I appreciate that reflection. I'll come back to you in just a second, but I'll tee up this next question, which is, one of the challenges that we see as funders is that organizations aren't always ready for growth when the external conditions make scaling optimal. So I'm just kind of curious to have you all reflect with us how ready your organization was for this sort of unpredicted or unprecedented moment and need of growth. And if you weren't ready, what did you do and how did you get ready? And any tips that you might want to share with folks in the audience who might be thinking about growth, any pro tips you might offer. So Billy, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, for sure. So, I'll be honest, I think early on in the pandemic, it was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. Everyone on the Zern team putting in long hours. To be honest, though, I think it was really nothing compared to the Herculean effort of those that were working on the ground in schools and districts. So I think that added a lot of perspective for our team. I will say, though, once we realized kind of the gravity of the situation and how this wasn't going away, there was definitely a mindset shift. So while we still needed to be reactive to market conditions, we needed really our capacity to be out in front of the demand. So I think organizationally, we shifted from a mindset where we would often only add capacity once we realized there was a big mismatch, to then kind of building capacity to give us the flexibility to truly be reactive. And putting the systems and structures in place, especially on the hiring front, to grow more quickly than we had before. Also just say, we're incredibly lucky to have the support of Overdeck and other philanthropic partners, which has enabled us to really invest out in front of this capacity and these structures.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Thanks, Billy. And, your infrastructure point and even a lot of the dimensions of growth resonate with some of the comments that Jay shared as just preparing the organization to meet the demand. Lauren, I'd like to invite you back in to see if you can offer any reflections or pro tips for folks that are thinking about growing soon or have it on the horizon.
Sure. So, we had a little bit of a runway because we were planning on launching the platform, which is really what led to our catalytic growth. But some of that was really challenging ourselves to think differently. If we were really going to put out a software solution that could be used by all, then we need to expand our definition of what we meant by all. And our experience was largely in metropolitan areas. And we really wanted to challenge ourselves to think bigger and broader. So while we still had our paper product, we purposely pursued rural partners, faith-based partners, different types of organizations who are providing out-of-school time services and supports for children. And we listened carefully to what is it that you need, what makes you different from some of our more traditional partners that are in a more metropolitan area, and ensured that those pieces that they expressed as a need in their community made it into our platform. It's just our continuous dedication to continuous improvement. That includes listening. Secondly, the other piece that allowed us to be successful was paying attention to our workforce. I'm a big fan. It can be a little dry, but I really like Beyond Performance. It's a great book that talks about the pillars that are necessary for an effective business. And sometimes in the nonprofit, we shy away a little bit of talking about the business side of what we do. You have the performance, you have strategy, and then you have the health. And the health is your people. You have to pay attention to your culture with rigor and making sure there's a lot of intentionality around creating a space that allowed creativity and entrepreneurial spirit to be able to take these big leaps that we were taking and pivot in such a huge and profound way. And then the third factor that I think really helped us was our board. Yeah, I'm just very lucky with my board chair, Laura Sandberg, is just an absolute champion for our space, but also a champion for the pivot we were trying to create in moving our board, who could have very well stayed in the status quo. Status quo is very comfortable, right? Convincing your board to leave the status quo in order to take a risk on something that could create catalytic change is not easy. But she did that, and my board did that, and they're great support. Without them, we wouldn't have been able to get this done.
Awesome. I love that reflection on the board and the role that they played. Really helpful perspective. Claudia, I'll invite you into the conversation. I'd love to hear you, and then over to you, Jay, and then I'll have you close us out, Brian.
Okay. Well, we had been growing, so we built on some of the best practices that we'd already put into place, but we faced at least one significant challenge. Even though we're a virtual program, we have a couple of key in-person meetings with our families, and probably the most important one is the initial training with parents. Well, we couldn't do that in person. So we had to develop good online training modules, but it just wasn't the same as that all-important human touch. I think the other thing we learned a great deal about was working from home caused initial pains, but eventually resulted in great benefit to us. Previously, most of our operation had been Utah-based, but when we saw that working from home could work well, we opened up all of our talent recruitment nationwide, and we started getting some amazing candidates. So amazing that we've actually upped the qualifications for all of our coaches, and it's also really increased the diversity of our staff. And speaking of diversity, it was a tremendously busy time for us, but in the middle of it, we undertook significant diversity and inclusion work that we felt was necessary to undergird our work with our expanded participation. Anybody who's done this knows it's not easy and it's not comfortable, but it's been tremendous for us as an organization. And I would suggest it's the absolute best investment you can make, even at a time when you don't think you even have one more minute to do anything else.
So true. It's so critical at any stage of the journey, and especially when there's a growth on the horizon. So Hijay, I'll turn it over to you, and then Brian. Go ahead.
I think Anu, you asked, were we ready for the growth? Definitely not. To give you a sense, we kind of anticipate a best case scenario of 3x growth in the back to school season following spring of 2020. And we were at the time redesigning and rebuilding our entire technology stack in advance of the summer. So what COVID kind of thrusted into is rebuilding all of our platforms while scaling to meet the demand. So we were definitely not ready. I think, however, if you take a step back, the way that our model works is using technology. So at the core of it, as a technology-based solution, we already had a plan for scalable, sustainable growth with, earned revenue kind of bolstering some of our financials. I think our biggest challenge was scaling operations quickly and efficiently while not losing the quality of the experiences for our families and schools and educators while raising philanthropic funding at the same time. So I would say kind of a couple of learnings. I mean, I think staying grounded to our mission and kind of really centering around that and our organizational values helped a lot. I think many of you touched on people were working really, really long hours during the first 6 months of the pandemic, but almost we were grateful to have something that grounded us and away from the awful news and the fear that everyone felt at the time. Being nimble to the needs of the community. Many of the panelists also shared that. I started getting calls from district leaders, superintendents, and say, you need to open up the platform for free. We need this right now, like last week. And that's what made us make the decision of opening up for free to Title I schools and districts. So really being nimble to our needs. And then also processes and systems. We've kind of made a practice of always think about the next bottleneck to growth. What is that? Is that the internal capacity? Is that external constraint? And kind of being a step ahead and thinking about that at the time. And now we joke around and say, okay, what's stopping us from growing 10x again? And what could that be down the line? And preempting that a little bit as well.
I love the forward thinking. What's the next bottleneck for growth and planning towards that? It's a good reminder. Brian, over to you.
Yeah, well, we weren't ready for so many things, but I guess the one I would flag is we weren't ready for schools needing lots of help with staffing models that directly address teacher shortage. We have these models called Team Reach, where instead of filling every vacancy, often with a long-term sub or an emergency hire, schools add paraprofessionals or teacher residents, and they support the team. And they also provide a lot of tutoring, which we know from research can have a huge impact. And so when COVID hit, we weren't really ready to help schools as well as we should have been with this kind of model. We had to build out the technical design, and we had to prepare the team to lead schools towards these kinds of models when they needed them. We made a lot of progress on that. It's still a work in progress. And I think it's really the same lesson that EJ just shared, which is we could have seen this coming. And I think some folks on our team did. Shortages were already a factor for high need schools before COVID. They were a looming crisis for other schools. Getting ahead of trends like that and being ready to help is a way we can be ready for growth. That's what I would add.
Thanks, Brian, for that perspective. So we have about 10 minutes left and a few questions from the audience. So I'll start with one question from the audience about your predictions about where you think the market demand might be in 2022 and where you expect to see growth for your organizations or for the education sector more broadly. And I will sort of keep this as a free question and invite anyone to jump in first and sort of keep this as a more casual part of the conversation.
So Anu, I'll jump in. I think from the education industry in specifically, social emotional learning is going to be a big growth area. What is it? There's $50 billion being put into it over the next 10 years. So I think social emotional learning and hands-on together will be pretty strong for our organization.
Yeah,
I'd echo that. And I think, teachers have faced so much in this crisis. There's so much on their backs. I think teachers are going to flee schools. I think schools need to look and will look at a new pipeline of human capital. That's what tutoring has potential to serve. And I think technological tools will also be even more in demand than they've been in the last couple of decades.
Hi everyone, I'm AJ. I'm the co-founder of Saga. Technical difficulties, but I'm so excited to be part of this conversation. At the end of the day, what we're trying to do at Saga is to inspire schools and districts to reimagine how schools are structured so that they embed as part of the regular school day opportunities for tutoring at critical growth years, which we see as early literacy and late math, and using evidence as a way to show what works. What's super exciting and fascinating about Saga is not just what we're researching and what we're doing. It is the extent to which we've leveraged this research to create a nationwide movement around leveraging high impact tutoring as a way to hedge against the effects of COVID-19. At the end of the day, why do we do research? It's to create real meaningful change. And we were able to accomplish this through thought leadership, creating op-eds and content in insider groups, but also building meaningful relationships with key decision makers, participating in briefings in partnership with the University of Chicago, JPAL North America, and others, not only talk about the evidence base, but the hallmarks that lead to success. And that in turn had an incredible trickle-down effect. In the Hill recently, according to JPAL North America, 33 states, as part of their plans to use stimulus dollars, 33 states are going to use high impact tutoring as part of their strategy. In a recent American Superintendent Association survey, 44% of district leaders are going to use high impact tutoring as a way to support youth. And as Al mentioned, we coined that term high dosage tutoring. And we were able to do that by, partnering and building an ecosystem for people to adopt and implement this work. That includes National Student Support Accelerator, proventutoring.org, the U.S. Department of Education, which, by the way, in their COVID-19 relief guidelines featured the hallmarks of Saga as well as the research on our work. And I'm really proud that the research spaces serve as a catalyst for what I know and believe will be a federal initiative moving forward around tutoring as a way to support youth.
Thanks, AJ. I might even go one step further to say that I think that the work that you all have done at Saga will continue to be in high demand in the coming years, as well as we're already seeing incredible influx of dollars, but also interest in high dosage tutoring going forward. Brian, I see you off mute. Do you want to jump in with any predictions for growth or demand in 2022?
+1 on the tutoring as being so essential. And what I would add there is a demand for how can we rethink school design so that this kind of high dosage tutoring can be done every year for every kid who needs it beyond any kind of COVID relief dollars. It's embedded in the school model so we can keep doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Just add, what's absolute fact is, if you think of it too, is that our current second graders have not experienced school normally at all their entire career. My daughter is a sophomore in high school, and she has not experienced school normally since she was a 7th grader. Right? The experiences that this entire generation is having is not normal. Right. And so we need continued advocacy and not see that this recovery is a one-time fix. This is not a 2 or 3 year problem. This is a decades problem that is going to take a comprehensive approach, that is going to need not only tutoring, but care for our teachers, giving them the tools and resources they need, solutions for the school day, solutions for the out of school time. It has to be holistic, comprehensive from every facet in order to ensure that this generation can compensate somewhere along the line. Who knows what's really going to be that end research results, But we can't forget the fact that it is not normal. What they're experiencing is not normal, and we can't take our foot off the gas advocating for this entire generation of children.
Yeah, thank you for that urgency and the continued commitment on the work, Lauren. It's a really good reminder and good call to action. I'll take maybe two more predictions from folks on growth in where we're going to see growth or maybe increased demand in 2022, and then we'll do a quick poll and take one more Q&A question from the audience.
I'll jump in briefly. I see a few other things in the crystal ball. So I think that Saga is exactly right, that capacity constraints are going to be a continued headline and concern for districts. And that means that districts are going to have to mobilize a broad coalition of caring adults to support COVID learning recovery, including teachers, including tutors, including paraprofessionals, including grad school of education students, and last but certainly not least, including parents. I think a second prediction is that districts are going to continue to want intensive support for students, but also management support for themselves. They have precious little bandwidth and capacity, so they need partners to be able to shoulder the burden with them and in some cases for them. And then the last thing that I see in the crystal ball, parents aren't going anywhere. Districts are going to have to offer families exactly what they're asking for, which is personalized guidance to support learning at home.
Yeah. Awesome.
And I'm just going to say I agree with everything Alejandro just said, but I think the other thing we need to do is study what parents are thinking and doing. We have a lot of data that says, I'm very satisfied with this program, but why? How did it change what you're doing as a parent, et cetera? And that's a different kind of research, I think, than a lot of us have been doing.
Yeah, super helpful.
Add, not only do we need to consider socially emotional learning skills for scholars, we also need to consider socially emotional learning for our educators. I am hearing, seeing, watching educators that I never dreamed would leave the profession at this moment in time, leaving it. And they are leaving because they are frustrated. They are finding it extremely difficult to shift back and forth between face-to-face, virtual, hybrid, and back again. And we really need to pay attention to their needs as well as to the needs of our scholars, our parents, our administrators, and our greater education community. Thank you.
Well said, Catherine. Sarah, I'm going to let you jump in here to close us out, and then we'll do a quick poll.
Thank you. Yeah, so just like everybody else, we have the same prediction. The school systems are going to continue to have staffing issues. And what we see is that school systems are reaching out to us to outsource their entire instructional model, or because they have teacher shortages, they are asking other instructional leaders to fill those gaps, and then they want us to be the coaches to teachers. And what we're really focused on right now at Teaching Lab is supporting the systems with their immediate needs while also supporting them with sustainable plans over time. So I think Brian is right. There will be opportunities to innovate new staffing models and other models that really serve students and families and school communities better, but it's going to be on the partners to help systems develop those models because they don't have the bandwidth to think about all of those things right now. So like it will be very seductive to just get money and fill gaps. And we need to like get on the balcony and figure out what's the long-term plan and how do we do things like coach the coaches, build sustainable systems, get things that can last in place in schools and systems.
Well said, Sarah. And sort of just another another thread on infrastructure and making sure that we have the right systems in place for long-term impact and growth. Before we close out, I'm just going to pull up two quick polls for the audience. We'd love to get your thoughts on what you heard today. And we should have these coming up here in just a second. There's two questions. Take a moment. Thanks all for dropping in your quick responses. As we close out here, I want to thank folks in the audience for submitting questions and through the Q&A. We weren't able to get to all of them. We'll hopefully get a chance to follow up with some of the answers with regards to any specific programs that might have some good responses. And in the meantime, I just want to thank you all again for joining our session and for your interest and your engagement. It's been such a pleasure and honor learning from all of you on this panel. And you really helped us to sort of crystallize some key lessons and the challenges in the last year, and even given us some really good thinking about how we can continue to stay focused on our work in the years ahead. If you'd like to contact any of our incredible panelists from today's webinar, here's their contact information. We'll follow up with that as well. And you can read more about these organizations and their 2021 successes in the Overdeck Family Foundation inaugural Grant Making and Impact Report, which is available for download now at our website here at overdeck.org. We've also dropped the link in the chat a few times. Take care and thanks again, and have a great rest of your day. And thank you all to the incredible panelists for this great conversation today and for your contributions. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.